You like being in other people's business.
This punk really doesn't know what he's doing. He's messing with a man who's so ruthless. Not knowing that soon he will be dead, Uncle Dan did not want to interfere. But the punk kept challenging his bottom line. He couldn't stand it any longer, seeing that the boss has been overpowered by one move. His boys were about to make a move, but they were warned to stay away. Uncle Dan pressed the gangster's central nervous system. Within 10 seconds, he'll be incontinent. The gangster didn't dare to do anything. He had to follow Uncle Dan's orders and let his men leave first. Uncle Dan told him this is called pain compliance. Though you don't want to obey, but your body is still very honest. Uncle Dan asked the gangster to hand over his gun, and then politely let them leave. Obviously, things won't end so easily. While the gangsters were discussing how to deal with Uncle Dan, a van crashed into them, killed 2 of his men on the spot. For Uncle Dan, a veteran, how can he not know the trouble of letting a tiger go back to the mountain? He took care of the gangsters in no time. But he was the brother of Vincent, the godfather of the local mafia. He's not only the most powerful drug lord in the area, he's also connected to a group of terrorists in Italy. It all started half a month ago. Adam, the drug lord, was returning home with his grandson. But as soon as he got to the door, he saw one of his men killed. Sensing something was wrong, Adam grabbed his gun. He went inside. The bodies of his men were all over the floor. The deaths were horrific, like an inferno. Into the basement, Uncle Dan was wiping the blood on his hands. Despite being held at gunpoint, he didn't seem to be in a hurry. Adam asked him why he was doing it. Uncle Dan said, "You took something you shouldn't have. Now hand him over, or I'll kill you and take it myself." Adam said, "I don't believe you. I'm afraid you can't get in or out." And Uncle Dan didn't want to talk to them anymore. As usual, he counted down with a stopwatch. When the people have not reacted, suddenly start to kill a few horses, followed by a shot to kill Adam. This speed is worthy of a professional killer. After the battle, Uncle Dan was about to leave. He saw Adam's grandson. Uncle Dan, who is kind-hearted, didn't kill him. He decided to let him live, but when he was about to leave, the kid shot him in the back. Ji told us, "If you don't get rid of the roots, the spring breeze blows again." It seems that Uncle Dan does not understand this principle. The wounded Dan drove away from here, but he passed out in the middle of the road due to exhaustion. Luckily, a passing policeman, Gio, saved him. He was sent to a health center in a nearby town. Enzo, the local doctor, operated on him. Uncle Dan is out of danger for the time being. Instinctively, Dan did not trust him. He wanted to leave. The doctor explained that it was safe here. You can rest assured that you can recuperate. A few days later, Uncle Dan has recovered a lot. In order to get rid of his own suspicion, he contacted the CIA anonymously. He lied that he had discovered a drug lord's lair, but he asked them to clean up the mess. Meanwhile, as Uncle Dan became more familiar with the town, he found out that there are a group of gangsters here. They've been collecting protection money from all over the place. The owner of the seafood store was beaten up. He was beaten up. Uncle Dan was so angry that he watched them leave. It's a debt of gratitude, but the gang didn't stop there. They rushed to another place to collect the debt. This time, the boss, Vincent, came in person. A husband and wife, because the old man is seriously ill. They can't make ends meet. They owed a lot of money and couldn't pay it back. Vincent cruelly hung the old man in the air as a warning. On the other side, the owner of the seafood restaurant is not doing well either. Because he couldn't pay the protection fee, his store was burned down that night. Police officer Joe couldn't stand it anymore. He decided to investigate these people thoroughly. He didn't realize that this would make him a thorn in the side of the gangsters. On the other side, Emma followed the clues and found out that Uncle Dan is the one who reported the case anonymously. Uncle Dan is no longer in disguise and gave her some new clues. Hope she can solve the case as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Gio went to pick up his daughter from school, but he found her missing. He rushed home. He found a bunch of punks sitting in the house, but before Gio could question them, Gio was attacked by one of the thugs from behind. Then he was beaten up. The leader of the gang threatened Gio's daughter. If it happens again, it won't be so simple. There was nothing Gio and his family could do. As Dr. Enzo said, they're like a cancer with no cure. But Uncle Dan didn't want to stand by and watch. A few days later, the gangs came back to haunt them. They threatened Gio's family to do something illegal. Uncle Dan saw this scene from a short distance away. He stared at them as if they were dead. The gangsters were very upset. They wanted to come over and start a fight, but Uncle Dan didn't take him seriously, so the scene at the beginning appeared. The leader of the gang was overpowered by one move. He had to surrender. Uncle Dan, in order to prevent future problems, he took care of the gangsters. The next day, there was an explosion at the local train station. According to the investigation, the bombing was related to drugs. The CIA approached the local police chief, hoping to get some help. But, to their surprise, the chief was in cahoots with the mafia. He told them everything, but the boss was busy with his brother's funeral. He didn't care about that. The director saw that he was not respected. He insulted Boss Black as a barbarian. It's better if he doesn't say anything. If he wanted to leave after saying that, there was no way he could do so. He stabbed him through the palm of his hand and warned him that he must find his brother's murderer as a punishment for speaking out of turn. His subordinates cut off his palm directly. At this point, Uncle Dan speculated, Vincent is probably the mastermind of drug trafficking. He immediately told Emma, before they met the director, they might have exposed themselves. At that moment, an explosion came out of nowhere. Emma was blown away instantly. Luckily, she was some distance away from the center of the explosion. She escaped with her life. But this also confirms Uncle Don's suspicion. That night, Vincent and his men kidnapped Gio's family. He threatened the villagers to hand over his brother's murderer. Otherwise, he would kill Gio's family. When no one responded, Vincent shot Gio through the ear. Uncle Dan couldn't stand it anymore. He came out from the alley. He said, "Kill or be killed. You're free to do so, but not in front of everyone. The boss doesn't like that." He wanted to kill Uncle Dan right away. At that moment, there was a gunshot from afar. It was Dr. Enzo. The villagers couldn't stay any longer. They took out their cell phones to record the incident. Although Vincent is a gangster, but he's worried about being exposed on the internet, so he had to leave for the time being. Uncle Dan knows that the mafia won't give up. There's no time to lose. He decided to take action that night to kill them. At night, a siren came from the car. The guard went to check it out. He thought it was a false alarm, but he was killed in a couple of blows. Upstairs, a few people were playing Pai Gao. Suddenly the electric switch was pulled. The next scene is predictable. The bodyguard heard the noise. He rushed to get the CCTV, but before he could react, Uncle Dan stabbed him in the throat. At that moment, the boss was sleeping. Suddenly woke up by the blood dripping from his head. He soon realized something was wrong. He went forward to take a closer look. It was one of his own men.